you went back to Dan Schneider. So it couldn't have been that bad for you. They don't care about you. Even if you're a child, I bet that man would have choked Brian Peck out on sight. They feel like if they bring two black people on, they have to ask them about like the black experience. The most heinous thing that you could do. To violate a child. All right, folks, so episode 5 of Quiet on Set, The Dark Side of TV just aired last night at 8 p.m. I was going to go live right after it, but I had so many thoughts. I didn't just want to go live. I wanted to give you guys something that was well thought out. So a lot was talked about. We got some new revelations and a ton of hypocrisy I actually saw in this episode. So we're going to talk about it all. First, welcome to Christosophy, everybody, the show where we talk about relevant topics, but we also shine light into the darkest of places and spaces. And folks, this episode is going to be no different. A warning in advance, there's some disturbing content in this episode, so like, subscribe, click the bell so you don't miss more. All right, so the episode started right off with Drake. With the previous 4 episodes, they waited a while to introduce him because he had that like blockbuster of a revelation to give, but they started right off with Drake Bell. The entire show was hosted by Soledad O'Brien, and hats off to her. I think she did a masterful job there, asking questions but being very sensitive, knowing kind of when to push and ask for further detail, and when to kind of understand that yes, a lot of the people in this interview were holding things back, perhaps because it was too painful. So I think she was sensitive to that instead of just like pushing for more information. Something we didn't see with the Dan Schneider and Boogie interview, where Boogie didn't push back on pretty much anything. And that's an interview where you should have pushed because that guy had a lot to answer for, and he really didn't in his interview. Okay, so they picked up, thankfully, in the aftermath of the first 4 episodes. Okay, so Drake was doing a lot of reacting to the explosive attention that Quiet on Set got on social media and how it's affected him, why he came out now. You know, I forget who said it. I think it was actually Brian Hearns, who was quoted as saying, there is no timetable for healing. I think that in this particular case, because you're dealing with kids who are around such depravity and disgustingness, they don't really have a timetable on when they should be coming out. I know that's something that's brought up a lot in terms of assault cases. It's like, well, why did you wait so long? But with a lot of these kids, they didn't even know themselves fully. They didn't know some of the jokes that were going over their heads. And so, okay, if it happened while you were a minor and your guardians didn't catch it or turned a blind eye to that, when you're older and you start to notice some things about yourself, but you don't know when it started or how it came to be, and then you see this documentary and you see these were the things going on. I wasn't crazy. That's the moment. And Brian Hearns has a moment. He's able to pinpoint something traumatic that happened in his life. I don't think that these kids, including Drake Bell, these kid actors now turned adults, should have come out earlier. I think it's something they should have just came to when they were ready. He talked about the court case against Brian Peck, in which, you know, he goes into the courtroom, half the room, Brian Peck's side is full of celebrities and famous names, and then his side is just he and his mom and his brother. And I think this goes to show just how deep-seated the wickedness in Hollywood and entertainment truly is. This was not a new revelation from this episode. What was, though, is that Will from Boy Meets World, Drake and he had worked together. Will was on his podcast talking about how, you know, he was in that room, that courtroom, on the side of Brian Peck, and he remembers Drake's mom saying, you know, that's nice. Brian Peck brought all his friends. It's still not going to change what he did to my son. Remember, at this point, Brian Peck was convicted already of these crimes. And so Will ends up saying, you know, in that moment, I thought to myself, what am I doing here? Okay, so he's talking about this big moment of conviction. And Drake, honestly, he says, listen, you had so many opportunities. We worked together on a Spider-Man project. He said you had opportunities to apologize or say, hey, you know, I was wrong. I didn't have all the information or whatever to make amends, to make it right with Drake, who was a child at the time, of course. And he didn't do that, okay? And Brian Hearns and Gio Samuels also pick up on that later in the episodes because they make an appearance as well as a newcomer, Shane Lyons. So we'll get to all that later in the show. Drake also mentions that no one reached out to him. And I think it just goes to show, yeah, these people can be very ugly. They don't care about you. Even if you're a child, even if somebody's been convicted of doing the most heinous things, they care about their career. They care about that paycheck. They care about their next project. They care about the next time they'll be in the tabloids. They care about the next show. And so even behind the scenes, nobody reached out to Drake. Let's remember that he was unnamed in the lawsuit. So a lot of people didn't know that it was Drake. I'm talking about the people, the celebrities, the elites, the people in power who did know. They made no effort to just say, hey, I can't imagine what you're going through. It must be incredible pain, and I'm sorry. Something as simple as that. No one reached out. So, miss me with all the benevolent celebrities out there in Hollywood, all the charities they donate to, and all their great, warm, butterfly feeling social media posts. When you see the dark side, when you see the other side of the business, you see how cutthroat some of these people can be. So Drake did also a little defense of his parents. Of course, he talked about them. Soledad did a great job in just asking him, what's your relationship like with your parents now? And of course, as we saw from the past 4 episodes, his relationship with his father is great. I can't imagine the pain that his father is going through, feeling like you knew, you understood what was going on. And there's a kind of a tie between Drake's father and Tracy Brown, which is Brian Hearn's mother, in how they were both hyper-aware parents on the set, and they had this sixth sense to protect their children. And Tracy Brown ended up, it caused a horrible rift in her and her son's relationship. We'll get to that later. But I bet Drake's dad would have paid anything to have had Drake fired off of the set of The Amanda Show, to have him ousted from Hollywood, if it meant that a predator would not get to put their hands on his son. And so I bet there's a lot of regret there. But Drake says his relationship with his father is great. He says, he's still very emotional about it. I would imagine that the documentary itself brought up a lot of that pain, that trauma. But he said that his mother, a lot of people were coming after her. Like, how could you do this? And, I respect the man. You're protecting your mama. Every guy's going to protect his mom. I do, however, think that her actions were inexcusable. And the reason is, I don't care what your relationship is with your spouse. The father or the mother of your children. If anybody comes to me about my spouse or even ex-spouse and them not putting their child's career first as a priority and taking advantage of money, are you kidding me? Drake's father had not done anything illegal, physically or monetarily or anything of the sort. You better have evidence that you've seen with your own eyes before you let anyone. I don't care how charming Brian Peck is. I don't care how convincing the arguments and the things that he's saying are. This is the father of your child. Or if the roles are reversed, the mother of your child who's never harmed them to your knowledge or to anyone's knowledge at all. You better have serious evidence that you've seen yourself before you try to push to take that child who is not just yours, but you and your spouse's, whether you stay married or get divorced, before you take that child or try to take that child away from that parent. It is you cannot undo the trauma that has been done to that man, feeling his son get pulled away from him. And in polite society, there being nothing he could do. I'll tell you what, in hindsight, I bet that man would have choked Brian Peck out on sight, on that set, and let all heck break loose. Let the cards fall where they may. He would have punched him so hard in the face before he would ever let Brian Peck lay a single finger on his son if he knew what would be happening. When a parent wants to protect their child, there are not many forces on this earth that can prevent them from doing so, from protecting their child. And so I really feel for that guy. And any parent, even Tracy Brown, we'll get to her later, who had something like this happen to them and were kind of aware, but, you know, in polite society, didn't feel comfortable speaking up or maybe pushed as far as they could without going crazy or having restraining orders. I like something that Tracy Brown said, though. She said, and I said this in a couple episodes before, as a parent, especially a parent of a young talent, a young actor, your first priority is not their career. Your first priority has to be their safety. I've said this in episodes before, Hollywood is not safe. And so the first thing you need to be thinking about is keeping your child safe and protected on set and on the projects that he or she is doing. Secondary is their career. So even with Drake's father's situation, he did what he thought was appropriate, but he should have gone the extra step. He should have filed for a restraining order. Who cares if you get labeled a crazy parent? We'll talk about the resentment that can grow from that. And so that's what a lot of people were reacting to in terms of Drake's mom. But Drake defends her and he says, listen, Brian Peck was so convincing and the arguments that he was making, he could have convinced anybody. Listen, arguments don't matter when it comes to protecting your child, the one you have custody of. I've said this before, nobody loves your child in Hollywood more than you do. They may like your kid, they may have genuine love for the kid and want to see them do well and see them protected, but not more than their parents. And anybody who tells you otherwise is stupid. Now, there are parents, obviously, who abuse their kids and have bad relationships with their kids and, you know, eat up all their money and don't treat them right. Of course, right? But I would say, in my experience in Hollywood, that's more the exception than the rule. A lot of these parents out there, they are eager to see their kids successful. But if there's even a hint that their child is being mistreated, that's a wrap. You know, the gloves are coming off. Parents can't, you know, they're parents. And I think that's a great thing. Don't let anybody fool you into thinking parents don't need to protect their kids. I'm rambling on about it, but it's such an important thing. I think there's a lot of people in society and in the media that try to convince you that kids are not kids and that kids can take care of themselves, that kids can make grown-up decisions for themselves. They can't. Science doesn't even back that up. Their brains are literally underdeveloped. They're not little adults. They're children. That's why we have a different word for it. Anyway, let's move on. Drake was asked about the controversy with Josh Peck. So Josh Peck was seen for a long time, to catch you guys up, as not supporting Drake in his allegation against Dan Schneider. Josh Peck had a great relationship. Drake's allegation against Brian Peck. Two very different people. Both pretty sick, but two very different people. Brian Peck had an allegation against him from Drake. Josh didn't seem very supportive of Drake during that entire time, okay? Josh always, in addition, was very protective of Dan Schneider, which even Drake said, for the record, Dan Schneider was one of the best people to him during that time, okay? If not the best person to him in just caring, you know, about him. But Josh Peck, and this may be a little bit of a hot take, who knows? I get Dan Schneider vibes from Josh Peck, and not in the perverted way. Don't take my words out of context. I mean in the Hollywood chameleon sense. When Dan Schneider came out with his apology video, a lot of people were asking, myself included, okay, Dan Schneider, you're saying, oh yeah, if a kid was uncomfortable, don't make them do it. If there was anybody who ever felt like this, don't make them do it. Okay, great. You're saying great things. But have you changed as a man? Or has the industry changed and you're adapting to it? I just get a sense that Josh Peck is very similar. When it was not popular to support Drake, just like all the other celebrities on Brian Peck's side of the courtroom, when it wasn't popular to support him, Josh Peck was not on Drake's side. Now that it's popular to back Drake Bell, now that it's popular to support all this coming out about Nickelodeon, well, now Josh has softened his stance. And to me, it seems like too little too late. Like, of course you have that opinion now. Just like Dan Schneider has all these great opinions now. Where were you when it wasn't so popular? But I think that Drake Bell has love for Josh. And he said in a video that TMZ reported on that it's a very sensitive topic. He and Josh are still very close and they're working on it together. He basically reiterated the same thing in this interview with Soledad O'Brien for Quiet on Set. He didn't give much information. I think he said something like, we have a great bond and Josh is great, which is a non-answer. Soledad maybe could have pushed on this issue, but again, you're dealing with a victim of SA, okay? And so be thankful for what he has shared and maybe watch your mouth when pushing him for additional information, because you could be opening up very sensitive things. And she did that. She was very, again, like I said in the beginning, she was very sensitive to that kind of stuff. All right, so they finished up with talking about, you know, his music video, and the video does talk about a lot of what's happened. Maybe it was partly inspired by the documentary. It's doing very well. It's got a couple million views at this point. Okay, so from there, the interview moves on to Gio Samuels and to Brian Hearn. And I think this was a very interesting segment because, well, obviously they were talked to from the Black perspective. They wanted to get the Black perspective, which, if I can be honest, folks, I hate when Hollywood does that. Like, they feel like if they bring two Black people on, they have to ask them about, like, the Black experience, not just their experience on set. And of course, it factored in. Of course it did. And there were some like racist stereotypes on the show, so I'm not saying that it was irrelevant. It just always seems like it's front and center. But anyway, so they were both brought on and they talked about their experience on the show. Gio Samuels actually said she was terrified of Dan Schneider. But I want to push back on this a little bit. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that Gio made some great points about the working environment there and what she experienced as a kid and all the innuendos. Absolutely horrible stuff happening. But here's where she loses a little bit of credibility for me. She went back to be on Henry Danger. So she talks about, in this interview, a point where Dan Schneider actually gives her a phone call, reaches out to her, asking her for a letter of support or a comment of support. And she acts flabbergasted by that. Why? What could give him the idea that I liked working with him? Well, you went back on his show, right? You went on Henry Danger after experiencing what you experienced with all that. That would give him the inclination that maybe you liked him in terms of your working relationship. I don't think that call from Dan Schneider came out of nowhere. You wanted to work with him again, or you were willing to work with him again for your career. So again, I'm not making accusations, but guys, these celebrities, they're always thinking about that. How much of my popularity am I sacrificing to tell the truth about what happened to me? Is it really that bad? Can I push that down to advance my career? Or would it serve my career better to talk about my trauma right now? Again, this is the nature of the business. Gio Samuels is not doing anything that no other Hollywood celebrity has done or has ever thought about. They all think about that. PR, baby. It's public relations. Do you want to talk on this show, Quiet on Set, about just how bad Dan Schneider is and rah-rah and back up everything that Brian Hearns and everybody in the cast was saying for this show? But then you went back to Dan Schneider, so it couldn't have been that bad for you. And speaking of people who it was very bad for, Brian Hearns and his mother, Tracy Brown. They brought in Tracy Brown, and this was the most emotional part of the show. They alluded to it in the first 4 episodes, but they really dug into just how deep this divide was when Brian Hearns got kicked off or let go in regards to his role on All That. And that Tracy Brown was seen as the reason why. And she went into detail about a moment in the previous episodes where she saw in his body language that this young boy had become a man that didn't trust his mother. His mother was seen as overprotective, just a loudmouth, rude. Look what you've done to your son. You've ruined his career with your big mouth, right? That was the vibe you were getting. And it caused a rift in their relationship that lasted for what, decades? He was a young man, I think 13 at the time. She sent you guys have seen the episode. She sent a text message saying Happy Valentine's Day, and he responded. And that was the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship. Brian Hearn said that that moment where he got kicked off of the show, seeing it again and from a proper perspective of this Quiet on Set documentary, allowed him to pinpoint the moment that he stopped trusting his mother. At this point, this is big. Like, this is bigger than, not bigger than, but it's not just physical damage that is happening to these kids. Having their feet touched by adults, having liquids of all kinds exploded on them, having stereotypes. It's not just that, the physical slapstick nature of the abuse. Years and years and years of trauma and resentment this boy had for his own mother. You get one mom and you get one life. And a part of that will now have always been tainted by what that show did. When his mom dies, everybody dies, folks, he's going to wish that he had those years back. And him as a child could not have been held responsible for the way that he felt when the world painted his mother as the reason that his career went down. He couldn't have been held responsible for that. He's not an adult. He was a kid. His brain wasn't fully formed. He couldn't understand the complexities of the jokes and his mom's sensitivities to his protection and well-being. And he doesn't understand all the social fabric and spiderwebbing that goes into just a regular interaction on a Hollywood set. So he was a victim of that, and he'll never get those years back. Thankfully, he now has a relationship with his mom, and I hope it continues. I pray it continues to grow strong. And in hindsight, Brian Hearns now finds out that his mother was right. And by her getting him kicked off, because she did, let's be honest, by her getting him kicked off of that show, she could have been saving him from who knows what. She might have saved him from Pickle Boy. Just being honest. It was a very gut-wrenching moment because you really felt the years in between them. Like, they really didn't seem to talk. Like, he would put his arm on his mom, and it didn't seem natural. Because there was still so much in him that he was still trying to figure out. Ooh, man. That. How many years should somebody go away for doing that to a child and his mom? Brian Hearns talks about Dan Schneider's apology video as well. And just like Drake, he calls out fake behavior. Okay, he says, look, Dan Schneider was an actor before this. I think he put on a good show, you know? I think he did what he had to do to save his career. Brian Hearns made the same argument that I made, though. He said, where was that behavior when Jeanette McCurdy put out her book? What about Angelique Bates, who was briefly featured? And so, again, I talk about that chameleon ability to adapt to the times. Well, he didn't come out with an apology video when Jeanette put out her piece because the pressure wasn't on as hard as it was here. And so now that he's feeling a threat to his career, it's time for an apology video. Let me ask my manager, my publicist, yeah, this is the right thing to do. All right, guys, I'm just calling it like I see it. I don't know Dan Schneider. I don't know the man. Knowing the power of media, I know how the media can make you think something and have a real opinion of somebody you've never met in your entire life. And so I don't want to be ignorant of that. I don't know Dan Schneider. What the man has said and done of his own words, that's what I'm basing it off of. He seems very fake to me. And you can tell fakeness when the man won't say the names of the people that he affected. When he says, if anybody was uncomfortable if anybody, if anybody, like, who are you talking to? This is imaginary at this point. Well, then I apologize. All right, so let's get to Shane Lyons. Shane Lyons was brought on, Soledad brought him on to share some additional perspective on Brian Peck, aka Pickle Boy, the man who essayed Drake Bell. Straight up nasty stuff. And he says that Brian Peck had even made a pass or two on him. He even goes as far as asking the child of 13 years old if he knew what blue balls were. And Shane says it himself. Why are you talking to kids about that? And he asks the boy, you know what they are, right? Ugh. And the 13-year-old boy, Shane Lyons, replies, yeah, they're like racquetballs. I'm so glad that the cast is so honest about the jokes that straight went over their heads. If you're young watching this video, do not, please do not fall to the pressure to seem older or appear older. Guys, we need to address that there's a real pressure for kids to act older than they are. And what it makes kids feel like they have to do is they have to go and research and find out about things they don't know. Oh, well, my friend said this, and I don't know what that means. And what kind of innuendo is that? Why is that funny? And they look this stuff up because they have access to the internet. They have access to these phones because their parents act ignorant to what phones can do. They know what phones can do. They know what internet access can do because the internet and the content on the internet has some of the parents addicted. So the fact that they, having suffered these addictive things, these devices themselves, would not protect their kids from this stuff. And they allow their kids these devices with internet access that they can go and look up stuff that they hear. Language or jokes that maybe their parents made in adult conversation that they overheard that they don't understand. There used to be a time where you couldn't know. You just didn't know what that meant. Maybe you'll understand when you're older, right? Now they can understand with Google. So Brian Peck allegedly talking to Shane Lyons about blue balls. Predator behavior right there. And again, the question is, well, where was his guardian? But it just shows that it wasn't just Drake. He was probably looking for opportunities with any boy that he could get with. Dangerous, dangerous place for children. Dangerous enough for adults. How much more so for the most vulnerable? Now, this is the part of the show that I think was very impactful. They opened up a discussion, a dialogue about what kind of changes could be made to protect kids going forward. We have child labor laws, but we only have child labor laws because children were abused on sets very early in Hollywood's history. Shane Lyons says that offenders, SA offenders, should not be allowed on any set, period. Not just a Hollywood children's production, but a set of any kind. In other words, they should lose their livelihood. Now, that's certainly a giant punishment to take away somebody's ability to earn a living. I don't care. I support that. I really think you should lose that industry. It is a privilege to be in Hollywood. It's a privilege to write television. It's a privilege to be on TV. Even though you worked your behind off to get there, don't get me wrong, very few ever make it. And so you need to understand how blessed you are to be in that position. And if you use that power, because it comes with great power. Not to quote Uncle Ben, but it comes with great responsibility as well. And when you use that position to abuse anybody, let alone a child, you should lose your right to operate in that industry, period. I think that's fair. Go find a new job. I don't care if you're flipping burgers the rest of your life. What's the most valuable thing in this society? Is it our television shows? No, it's our kids. And so when you hurt kids, that's got to be like, that's up there. Especially what Brian Peck did to Drake Bell, the most heinous thing that you could do. To violate a child. Shane Lyons is right. He should at least have his privilege to operate in Hollywood taken away. So the laws as they stand today are that as long as there's a guardian on set, a production doesn't need to do background checks. So you could have any assortment of weirdos on set around kids. Because then you wouldn't have people like Brian Peck, after serving only a year sentence for what he did to Drake Bell, being offered a job right back with kids on the set of The Sweet Life of Zack and Cody on the Disney Channel. Who knows if Quiet on Set is going to go after Disney? They said the dark side of kids' TV, not Nickelodeon TV. This could have and should have been like maybe the last episode until something major happened, or until they came out with their information on maybe Disney or another network. But I think there's an episode 6 coming, and so we'll see what that's about. Maybe we'll get more details over time. But of course, I want to know what you think down in the comments below. If there's any major points that I missed, of course, let me know. I'm just going off my notes. And I'd love to chat it up with you guys, as always, in the comments below. It's YouTube, so you got to like and you got to subscribe if you want more content just like this one. So keep it locked right here as we continue to fight evil.